Hey folks, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Tom Zuba. Really happy to have you with us tonight. I'm going to introduce you to three of my friends and their beloveds as we talk about childhood cancer. But before I do that, there's this book that I found. It's called Permission to Mourn. And I'm going to read a little bit from chapter 16, which is, "You are stronger than you think." I drove downtown to the county clerk's office. I was surprised and delighted that there was no line. I walked right up to the counter and was helped in less than 60 seconds. No waiting. I had already printed the request form at home using my computer and printer. I filled it out ahead of time. I read through it again to make sure everything was in order. And when the woman asked me how she could help, I handed her the form, as if I were handing a prescription to the pharmacist, or a receipt at the dry cleaners, or a claim check at a lawnmower repair shop. My actions seemed that ordinary and routine. 8 years after his death, I was requesting a copy of my 13-year-old son Rory's death certificate, his death certificate. As I said, I have already walked through fire. And so have you, Margo, and so have you, Joe, and so have you, Jessica, many times. And I think we would agree that today, on September 29th, we are stronger than we thought. We are stronger than we knew. We are stronger than we felt. And we are stronger than we believed. We have walked through fire, and we can do it again and again and again and again. So tonight, we're going to talk about childhood cancer. This month of September is Childhood Cancer Awareness. Why do we want to talk about it? Well, for one, the four of us have lived it, like many of you have. And I feel, I've experienced that it's way too easy for the rest of the world to kind of brush by. Oh yeah, they're the ones with the kid with cancer. I think she died. I'm pretty sure he died. It's in having a conversation about the beginning, the middle, the end, and then our lives that hopefully we realize we have much more in common. We have much more in common than maybe we thought, than maybe we've been led to believe. And we're each at a place where we can be a light. We can be a light for the other person, for the next person, for the people that got the diagnosis today, or for the people that are waiting for the test results. We've walked through fire. We've been fucking burned to the ground. And through hard work, we are rising. We are rising from that fire in the same way that the phoenix rises from the fire. And I have friends that do not like it when I say this, but I am an ordinary person. And Margo's an ordinary person. And Joe's an ordinary person. And Jessica's an ordinary person. And we have lived through extraordinary circumstances. And somewhere along the way, we made different choices. We made different choices because the old way of doing it, the old way of doing grief, is just too painful. It is just too painful. And we learned that there's a new way. There is a new way to do grief, which will create a new way to do life, which gives us the opportunity to become radiant. Is that an audacious suggestion that we could actually become radiant human beings? I think it is. I mean, I actually think it is, but we're living proof. We're living proof is what is possible. So, Jessica, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for asking me to. I'm in amazing company, so I'm grateful for all of you.
Margo, thank you for saying yes.
Thank you, Tom, for inviting us tonight to share.
Joe, thank you. Your very first time. I appreciate you being here.
Oh, thanks, Tom. Thanks for including me.
You're welcome. I had the opportunity of meeting Joe, who's Margo's husband, 2 years ago, over 2 years ago, when Joe very lovingly drove Margo to the retreat. And Joe and I sat by the lake and talked for 40 minutes, 50 minutes. And it was one of those conversations where I just knew, I knew this man is going to be my friend. This man is going to be my friend. So I'm really, really happy that you're willing to share with people that I care about, people that are listening live and on the recording. I'm really, really happy. So I want to light a candle tonight, and I want to light it for our beloveds, for Andrew and for Christopher, and for Olivia, and for Trish, and for Rory and Aaron. And I want to light this for all the beloveds that have brought their people with us tonight, either live or through the recording. And I want to thank them. I want to thank them for being what I believe are some of our absolutely greatest teachers. I believe that they continue to teach us. And my hope and my prayer and my intention is that they will pull out of us what every single person that is listening needs to hear, wants to hear. By hearing what we have to say, their light will be a little bit brighter. They will feel a little bit more hopeful, and they will say, I can do it one more day. I can do it one more day. I can do it one more day. I also want to let people know that I think this might really stun a lot of people, but I actually met my wife, Trish, working at the American Cancer Society. Never in a million years, never did it occur to me that one of my beloved children would get cancer. Trish had a huge job. She was really, really important. She worked for the state of Illinois, and she handled their public relations, their marketing, and their public affairs for the entire state of Illinois. My job, I worked for the city of Chicago. I had a pretty important job too. I had a huge $2 million budget. I had a staff of 5 people. I was not 27 years old. And what we did is, I was the director of service and rehabilitation. So my department managed hundreds and hundreds of volunteers that provided services throughout the entire city of Chicago to families and cancer patients. We had volunteer drivers who would pick you up at your house, drive you to treatment, stay with you during your treatment, bring you home. We had what at the time we called Reach to Recovery volunteers. And back then, when a woman had a mastectomy, when she could finally reach her hand up, that was a move in the right direction. So it was reach to recovery. So we trained volunteers, we scheduled the volunteers, we worked with the social workers, the clergy at all the hospitals throughout the city. We had people that worked with colostomy and ostomy patients. We provided dressings. When I think about it, the vast array of services. And like I said, it never in a million years occurred to me that one day I would be in a situation where maybe I'd be calling the Cancer Society. Maybe I would wonder what type of services do they have, which would make my life easier. So that's one of the things that I bring to this conversation. Another thing, and I'm going to talk about this later, I was the regional manager in the Midwest for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. I actually got that job after my daughter Erin died, a couple years after Erin died. And I remember thinking, it's interesting the stories that we tell ourselves, to kind of make some sense and to find some peace. But the story I told myself is, I will be the perfect regional manager for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital because I am the father of a little girl who died. She didn't die from cancer, but my little daughter died. And to me, that was God saying, this will balance it. This gives meaning and purpose to your daughter's death. Now, when the guy flew in from Memphis and fired me on my ass and said, pack up your shit and get out of here, I had to change my story. But I've had both of those experiences with the Cancer Society and with St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. So with that as an intro, this is where I thought we would start. What I want to do is paint a picture of what it's like to be merrily going along your way. Although Margo and Joe, I know your story, and I know you were not merrily going along your way because of your amazing son Christopher's dynamic life. But what is it like to have a vision and a dream for how life is going to unfold, and then all of a sudden you hear the words cancer? So where I thought we would start, and Jessica, why don't we start with you? What can you tell us about what led up to and what it was like when you received the diagnosis that your beautiful little girl has cancer?
Well, like you, many things were on my radar, but so cancer was never on mine. I am an anxious person by nature. I've tried and I am learning to become a little bit more calm. I do my very best despite everything that's happened. But I was worried about plastics and BPAs and food, and I was worried about toxins and about our air quality and about our water system in our home and having everything tested. Even our car seats, the European standards exceed the American standards, so we went with like European brands. I mean, I thought of all of these other ancillary things, but childhood cancer was never ever on my radar. So I had two beautiful little girls. Olivia was 4.5 when she was diagnosed, and Lily wasn't even 2. And I was working full time, and life was very hectic. But because of my two beautiful daughters, life was really, really good because I had them. And Tom, do you want me to talk about like what led up to the diagnosis, or just kind of diagnosis day, or?
I'm curious. I mean, you're living your life with two little girls.
Living life. Yeah.
And then
Olivia, yeah, so um, Olivia was in preschool because we thought it was a good idea to get her socialized before she started school. So, and she was having these tummy aches, and that was the only thing that was kind of off. And that was one of the first things, like when people found out in our circle that Olivia was diagnosed, everybody wanted to know what were the early warning signs. And initially that drove me crazy because it made me reflect back like, well, how could I have missed it? And I took it personally. And of course, it's just everyone's natural gut reaction. And that's one of the first things that they always asked me. What was it? Because of course they're thinking in their minds, I need to look for this in my children. So she had these cyclical tummy aches, and we were giving her antacids, and she would wake up, and sometimes she would throw up, and I would give her crackers. And I had a really sensitive stomach when I was growing up, and she's kind of hardwired like me, kind of tends to be a little bit more on the anxious side, not so much a go with the flow kiddo. And we were taking her for blood work, routine blood work with her pediatrician, and we were taking her every month. So in the third month, her tumor in her abdomen was large enough for the pediatrician to actually feel. So they felt something that obviously shouldn't have been there. The tumor was softball size upon diagnosis and had already metastasized. So they initially knew that something was very, very wrong. And then they sent us immediately to the hospital for images.
So let me stop.
And
Let me stop you for a second. So you take your daughter in, and they say, "Oh, I think I can feel a softball-sized tumor."
Yeah. And I actually wasn't even there. I was the only one working in my home and working full time. So I was called. My ex-husband called me to say, you need to get here right away. The pediatrician has felt something. And I came and I had that conversation with her in her office. And I'll never forget, she had a box of tissues, but she had them beside her. She couldn't get through the conversation with me without becoming so emotional. And anytime you hear mass, we don't know, images, I thought, this cannot be happening. In my head, I was screaming and I was trying to just remain so calm, knowing that my two little girls were just outside the room and they needed me to have my brave face on. And I remember immediately after talking with a coworker, because immediately all of my work plans had to change. I called family, and I was told lovingly that, oh, I heard of a similar situation and someone's child just had to go in and they found something. It turned out it was nothing. It was liver enzymes. It was something that was benign. And I thought, of course, that's what it will be, because this is the kind of thing that happens to other people. God bless them, but it cannot happen to my child, in my family. So I was hoping that story would be true. And then we immediately we were sent in for images, and I was having Olivia drink this contrast, which tastes horrible, so that they could do the CT scan, and trying to get her to drink that. And then immediately after, the radiologist called me into her office, this dark little room, and I had never met her before, of course. And she had like a half-eaten sandwich. I'll never forget thinking, how could she eat at a time like this when the whole life is like waging on what she's going to tell me? And she had the images pulled up on her, multiple monitors in her office, and I couldn't, look like hieroglyphics to me, like I couldn't decipher what it was. And I remember thinking, how could this woman be eating a sandwich and her life is normal and mine is hanging in the hinges? And she said, there's a really large mass and it's not normal and it's quite serious. And she wrote on a little sticky note 3 different possible things. And I was going back to the story that my coworker and friend had just told me about infection and liver enzymes. And I said, well, what if, what is? And she wrote the three things that she wrote on were two different types of cancer, childhood cancers that are most common of the solid tumors. And the third one, I think she wrote just for my benefit, liver enzyme with a question mark. And then we were immediately sent to the Children's Hospital in St. Louis, which was like 3.5 hours away.
So
We went home and packed our bags.
the first two that she wrote, was it clear to you that they were cancer?
It was clear to me, yeah. It was neuroblastoma, Wilms tumor, and then liver enzymes.
How did you know that Wilms tumor was even cancer?
Well, I assumed by tumor, but I didn't know. And friends of mine later on that day, when I uttered the words neuroblastoma, they said, well, we think that one's bad, but we think that's brain. And I didn't even want to Google. I was so terrified. I didn't even want to Google because I didn't want to know prognosis. I didn't want to know. And then my friend said, well, tell me what they're thinking. And then in those early days, we had so many questions because she was such an anomaly. She was from birth, but her cancer didn't present how it typically presents, and it had already metastasized. And so just the just pathology, waiting to find out what type of cancer it was, took 10 days. And it was agonizing. It just waiting and waiting and waiting.
Do you remember the name?
To find out what our...
Do you remember the name of either the oncologist or the radiologist?
I don't remember that first radiologist, but there was multiple oncologists that we met once we were at Barnes.
I'm wondering.
And then
I'm wondering that first one that you met. You said it was a woman. She had the clean.
Oh.
Do you remember her name?
I remember the pediatrician. I remember her name because she wasn't our usual pediatrician. She was filling in for our normal pediatrician that day.
Okay, so the one that had the Kleenex, that was your pediatrician?
Yes.
Okay.
That wasn't. She was filling in for him. So she was our...
Got you.
Yeah, she was delivering news, but she wasn't our normal. Yeah.
Got you. Thanks, Jessica.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Margo, what can you share with us about the diagnosis and what led up to that?
So Andrew is our second child. Our oldest son, Christopher, was born in November of 1986, and after birth discovered he had a heart defect that the only remedy really was to do a heart transplant, and that was back in 1986. And he ultimately died 72 hours after he was born. And it's so funny thinking back then. There's no internet, there's no Google, you need to go to the library to get information. And so afterwards, when we could start looking into what the heart defect was, we had a lot of questions, and we also had a lot of regret. And we would talk about what we would do in the future with a diagnosis and how the doctors made us feel. At the time, I was 19, and Joe, you were 23.
Yes.
When that all happened. So that in 1988 in February, we had Andrew. And I naively, when you have a baby that doesn't come home from the hospital, I naively thought that was the marker. If we can just get him home from the hospital, we will be okay. And so the pregnancy was very stressful. We had a lot of cardiac tests and higher level ultrasounds done during the pregnancy to make sure that the heart was forming and developing properly. We had him, I had premature labor and got put on bed rest. And so I finally had him. I got him to term. He was 2 weeks early when they took me off bed rest, and we had Andrew, and we got to come home. And I think both Joe and I kind of sighed, like, okay, we got him home. We're all good now. Like, it's all going to be good from here out. And so for 8 months, we had this amazing baby boy that we just adored, and was so easy and so joyful and so jolly. And as it got to be fall, it was just prior to Halloween, he had gotten a cold. And we brought him in, and this appointment was between his 6-month checkup and his 9-month newborn, checkup. And he got this cold, and we brought him to the pediatrician. And in doing the exam, he noticed one of his eyes had a little bit of a tremor. And, when they flashed the light in his eye, and they asked us if we had noticed that. And, we hadn't. And he goes, I'd like you to get this looked at. He could be getting a lazy eye or something. And, so we got the prescription for the cold he had, and then I had a prescription to get him in to a pediatric ophthalmologist. And this was Halloween week. So it took a couple weeks to get him into the pediatric ophthalmologist in Wheaton Eye Clinic. And Joe took the day off. And we went over to this ophthalmologist, and she did her exam. And I was just really bummed. I was like, my kid's going to have to get a pair of glasses, what a bummer, and did her exam, asked us a lot of questions. And at the end of the exam, she said, I'm not sure what this is. I'm not really worried, but to cover the bases, we would like to do a scan of his head. And I vividly remember going, well, to cover what bases? And she said, well, there could be a chance he has a brain tumor. Well, I about slid out of the chair with Andrew on my lap. Never had occurred to me, but she was very quick to reassure us based on all the questions. Had he been more fussy? Had he had a seizure? Had he thrown up? No, he was sleeping well. He was chattering. He was walking the furniture. He seemed completely normal to us. So she was pretty reassuring that, just to cover the bases, we're going to do this scan. And so I think it was the next week we got in for the MRI. And back then, we had to go to a freestanding building with the MRI machines. Like, even Children's in downtown Chicago did not have one in-house yet. And so we had to go to this building. To add one other layer to this, I found out between all of that I was expecting our next child. So I'm pregnant, early pregnancy, and we are going to have an MRI on our 8-month-old baby. And so Joe took the day off. It was November 22nd. It was the 25th anniversary of JFK being assassinated. It was also, being the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, it was the 2-year anniversary of our first son being born. And we went to go have this MRI. And, everyone was very lovely to us. And isn't he cute, And when they brought him back out to us, because they had to sedate him because he was a baby, in hindsight, they all looked different. And they gave him an extra hug and handed him over to us. And I say, what is our next step? And they're like, if you don't hear from your doctor by Friday, give the doctor a call. and we're like, okay. So this is, Tuesday afternoon. We come home on TV, like, where were you when this all went down? They were replaying footage from the day JFK was assassinated. So the black and white, Walter Cronkite breaking in. Andrew was sleeping in his crib, sleeping off the sedation. And I was curled up because I'm in my early pregnancy and don't feel very good. And about 5 o'clock, the phone rings and Joe answers the phone and says, "This is he." And then I hear him go, "Oh my God, how big?" And it was the ophthalmologist who was calling to tell us that there was a very large mass in his brain, and that the facility where we had gone to get the scan, there was someone staying there so Joe could get in the car to go get the film, because we had an appointment first thing in the morning in Chicago at Children's Memorial with a neurosurgeon. And that began our journey, with Andrew. And for us, and I think, Joe, you will agree, we had been laying in bed at night grieving our first son and talking about what we would do if something ever happened to one of our other children. I think a lot of people don't have those discussions, but because we had already lost one of our kids. And so instead of like crumpling in that moment, it was like, oh, okay, we've prepared for this. It's go time. And so Joe went and got the films. I started making phone calls, and then we went down to Chicago the next morning to meet with the neurosurgeon.
So Joe, you're the husband, you're the man, you're the protector, the provider. What are you feeling as this unfolds and the phone rings, you answer the phone and you get this news? What is that like for you?
Tom, it was interesting because the doctor, Dr. Osterly, I do remember her name, on the other end of the phone, was sobbing, telling me this news. And like Margo said, I mean, this is something that we had discussed. We had never imagined that it would ever come to fruition. But so it was almost surreal, because it was almost a scenario that we had played out in our minds as we discussed, after Christopher passed, but never thought that we would ever put into action. So it was almost surreal that it was happening. But in talking to Dr. Osterly, again, like Margo said, I remember saying, how big, where is it at? Okay. And she had made all the arrangements for us at Children's Memorial for the next day. She's like, you need to go here. I said, okay, tell me again so I could write it down. And it was just I felt very matter of fact about the whole thing. Again, like, you know what? This is what we talked about. This is what we prepared ourselves for. And here it is. And so it was interesting because like Margo said, we almost switched into this other persona.
So you had a job to do. You had to go get those films. Mm-hmm. You got in the car, you drove, you picked him up, you came home. Did you remember, did you guys look at the films?
No, not at all. We picked up, the big sleeve of films. By the time I got back, it was later at night. And I just remember, I got home and Andrew was asleep and Margaret was just waiting for me. And literally, I remember we just came in, put him on the counter, and got ready and went to sleep to get ready to head down to meet with the neurosurgeon the next morning.
And the next morning, you brought your son with you?
So the next morning we got up, and Margo and I and Andrew and my parents went down to Children's. and met the neurosurgeon. And he did actually first met with the resident first, and he did all the standard testing. And then then Dr. Tamita, the neurosurgeon, came in and introduced himself, and then he stepped out to look at the films, and then came in and said, yes, your son has this very, very large tumor, about the size of a small orange at that time. It's kind of compressed his brain to the side, and he said, go home, enjoy the holiday. Somebody will call you on Friday, but plan on coming back down to be admitted Sunday night, and we'll do some tests on Monday, and then most likely do surgery on Wednesday.
When he said the word tumor, was it implied that it was cancer?
He thought, given the size of it, he vaguely referenced it being malignant. And I think by what we interpreted by his sense of urgency, and just by his demeanor, that it was really serious.
So from that day to the beginning of the next week, I mean, how did you manage to stay in your body and walk through the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day?
It was interesting because, as Margo mentioned, it was Christopher was born on Tuesday, passed on Friday, and so we had those markers in there. We had Thanksgiving was Thursday. My father's birthday was that weekend, and my mom had planned a party for him. And so it was strange in the fact that we almost said, okay, well, let's do life until Sunday, until we have to go back down. And we had Thanksgiving, and we had the family get together for my dad's birthday. So it was strange. And then, because we just kind of, okay, we'll do life until Sunday, then we go to children's and we figure out what's going on.
Do you remember?
I don't know. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, Joe, I don't know if you remember, we went to like Sears or JCPenney.
Yeah, you guys
did
picture.
a photo shoot.
Yeah.
Like we took him and did you guys do that with your kids back in the day?
Did you do it consciously, or had it already been scheduled?
No, I did it very consciously.
Very consciously.
What were you thinking?
Because I had done a 3-month photo, a 6-month photo. We're coming into 9 months, and I've been told my son has a brain tumor. I wanted to go get photos of him,
Were you thinking, oh, he might not live?
I don't know, something made me know I needed to go document before we operate on his head, that I want current photos of him.
So,
and in looking at those photos, like you can see his eye is off. Like, how did I not know? How did I not notice this?
Well,
and
you never had a little boy that age before.
And the reason why he wasn't symptomatic is he was so young, his skull hadn't closed yet. So going back to our pediatrician, after he measures his head, you go and they measure it, you never really think about why are they measuring their head and measuring their height. Well, his head from the 6-month checkup to getting diagnosed had gotten ginormous and was off the growth chart. And that would have been another symptom if we had made it to his 9-month appointment.
Do you guys remember during those days, like, did you look in each other's eyes and go, oh my God, what if he has cancer?
I'll tell you what I thought, Joe, and then you can say I remember having a discussion with you. Well, maybe it's like picture a golf ball, like this encapsulated thing, and they're going to go in and they're just going to scoop it out and everything's going to be okay. Like,
best case scenario.
Yeah. They're going to go in and they're going to get it all and we're going to be just fine.
And do you think that story that you told yourself that allowed you to walk through the next days?
Sure.
Yeah.
And the unknown, and you said you working at American Cancer Society. That's where all the research, we're calling the American Cancer Society because they have pamphlets and brochures, but we don't know what kind yet, right? And there's the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation and the American Foundation for Brain, right? So those organizations, such as what you worked at, that is where you got your information about.
Yeah. So what year is this, Margo?
88. 88. November of 88. Were you there?
You know what's really, really interesting? So in November of 88, Trish would have been obsessed with the Great American Smokeout because the Great American Smokeout was always the first Thursday before Thanksgiving. And that's when, the incident of people that were smoking cigarettes was much higher. They tried to get everyone to stop for one day, thinking that if you could stop for one day, you could stop for the next, the next, the next. Yeah, we were there, and Trish was the person who, for the entire state of Illinois, was coordinating the outreach effort to increase awareness, get the pamphlets out, create the pamphlets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And in no coincidences, what did my mother die of 3 years prior? Lung cancer from being a smoker. So,
Wow. Oh. So let me tell you.
Yeah, so I was going to say from February of 85, right, I lose my mother. November of 86, I lose my son Christopher. And in November of 88, our son just is diagnosed with brain cancer, and I'm pregnant with my next child.
You've walked through fire. So I have a dead daughter and I have a dead wife, and I have two healthy kids. And my son Rory is brilliant. Stanford 9s, 99, 99, 99, 99. He is so excited the summer between 6th grade and 7th grade. He was off the charts. And I remember I would say, "What are you so excited about?" "I cannot wait for the 7th grade teachers to realize how smart I am, Dad. Once they realize how smart I am." And he was in the gifted program, so he was among really, really brilliant kids. He loves school. He was one of those kids that during the summer, he took, astronomy at the community college. He took Oriental painting. He took whatever, the first 30 days of Einstein's life. He thirsted for knowledge. So I remember the first day of school, they started in August, at the end of August. He missed the bus on the way to school, and I had to drive him to school. That was so odd. It really, really caught my attention. And I kind of screamed at him. I was like, what is your problem? You have a watch. You know what time the bus leaves. Why were you late? Come on, come on, come on. The next day, he missed the bus again. And it wasn't that he didn't want to go to school. He did want to go to school. He goes to school one day, goes to school the second day, and that night, in the middle of the night, I heard, honestly, I thought either someone was breaking into our house or there was a branch that was like brushing up against the window because of the wind. And I was exhausted. Both of my kids, had just started school. And I remember thinking, please, God, let me go to sleep. Let me go to sleep. Let me go to sleep. This force, which I will call the Holy Spirit, pushed me into Rory's bedroom, because I remember being in the bed, wishing I would go to sleep. And the next minute, I'm staring at him. The light in his room is on, which I turned on, and he is either having a seizure or a stroke. I wasn't sure which. And I turned to my right, and my little Sean, who was 8 years old, is just standing there staring at us. And what was interesting is my nephew had had a couple of seizures that summer, my nephew Connor. So I called my sister Mary. This is at 12:15 in the morning. And I woke her up and I said, let me explain to you what's happening with Rory. Is this the kind of seizure that Connor had? And she said, no, call 911 immediately. Get him to the hospital. I'll be over there. And honestly, I remember thinking, oh, shit. It's like, here we go again. I had done this twice before. I was like, oh, this is bad. Called 911. The ambulance came. I begged them to let me go with him in the ambulance, and they let me. By then, my sister Mary had gotten there, so she stayed with Sean. We drove to the ER. Seriously, and I just remember thinking, this can't be happening. They admitted him, test after test after test, and they said, we think he's got a hot spot on his left temporal lobe. We think he has a hot spot on his left temporal lobe. It could be this, it could be this, it could be this, it could be that. We don't know. His pediatrician, who was new, I had just seen this guy once. He was referred to me by my sister Anne-Marie, who's a nurse. In a very soft whisper, he said, it might be cancer. Nobody paid attention to him. And I remember thinking, how dare you suggest my son has cancer? I never saw him again. Never. I mean, I switched and I went with his partner. And I know his name. I was not going to see him again. So they kept Rory there for 5 days, which was a long time. And they decided that maybe he had some type of encephalitis. They put a port in him. He was getting balls of acyclovir. It's like a 10-day treatment. Let's see how it goes. It's interesting because you said, Margo, we got him home. When you got Andrew home, I remember thinking, I am leaving the hospital with a live human being? I'd never done that before. I'd never done that. I left Aaron's dead body and I left Trisha's dead body. So I was like, this is victorious. And he seemed really, really good. I mean, he was, when am I going back to school? I got some homework already to do. So I thought it's similar to what you said when, it's like, oh, my kid might have to wear glasses. I thought, well, this is a temporary setback. This is a bummer. This is a bummer. He had another MRI. He had another MRI. And one radiologist said, oh, that hot spot on the left temporal lobe is getting bigger. And then the next one would say, oh, it's the same. There's no growth whatsoever. The next one would say, it's actually shrinking. I mean, it's getting smaller and smaller. I remember saying, how about if all the radiologists sit down and review and you all come up with the same agreement? And one of them said, that will never happen. That will never, ever happen. I said, why not? I have my territory, she has her territory, he has her territory. That'll never happen. And I was like, well, that fucking sucks. That puts me in a really, really bind here because you're all giving me different, interpretations. We took him to Children's in Chicago, which you guys are very familiar with. And my mom and I really liked them. They were more professional. They were fascinated by the kid with the hot spot on the left temporal lobe. It would be 2 doctors. It would be med students. It would be other people. It was like a posse of 15 people. They were fascinated by him. They would poke him and ask him questions and ask me a million questions. Yeah, I'm sure that the students had to fill out the reports. Oh, maybe it's Hashimoto's encephalitis now. Let's try this. Or it could be this. Let's try this. It could be this. Let's try this. So this is from the end of August. It was 2004. So there was an election that first Tuesday in November. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Thursday night, I was giving a presentation in Naperville about supporting children whose parents died. It was one of my very first presentations, and Rory was with my mom. And that afternoon, a female radiologist called me and she said, I just want you to know I reviewed Rory's latest MRI. Mr. Zuba, he does not have cancer. I just want to assure you, he does not have cancer. That's what I wanted to hear. I was like, oh, thank you, Jesus. My kid doesn't have cancer. I'm so glad. What does he have? I don't know. No, I'm not really sure, but he doesn't have cancer. That night, Rory was having seizure after seizure after seizure after seizure. And I forget what it's called, but there was something, it was some type of enema that you could give him that would stop the seizures. And my mom said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. I said, please, please, please. When I got home, I called the pediatric neurologist by the name of Dr. Miner. I will never, ever forget it. And I said, Dr. Miner, Rory is having seizure after seizure after seizure. Would you please okay an ambulance? We really want to take him to Children's because this is bad. I'll never forget what he said. Mr. Zuba, for all I know, he has the flu. No, I will not okay an ambulance to Children's Memorial. I hung up. I said to my mom, we're taking him to Children's Memorial. I literally got his backpack with all of his school books, being certain that he would rebound, that he would want to do his homework because he wouldn't want to fall behind. So Friday, he's at Children's. They're all fascinating. You know, another MRI, they're poking and they're prodding, they're poking and they're prodding. And this doctor, by the name of Dr. Tamita, the same doctor that Joe and Margo worked with. So obviously he's Japanese. He said, you know, Mr. Zuba, I believe he has a brain tumor. And I believe it's very, very slow growing. It's possible he's had it his entire life. I'm going to schedule surgery on Tuesday. And my hope is I can remove the entire thing. Huh? Excuse me, what did you just say? You know, very patiently said it again. And I remember thinking, Rory loved Japan, loved all things Japanese. He will just love you, Dr. Tamita. And then he had an assistant, I can't remember his name. If you have any questions, this is, you know, she's blonde, I think. Here's her number. She is there to help you, help you, help you, help you. I had to tell my 13-and-a-half-year-old that he was going to have brain surgery. Actually, they called it, and they were going to do a biopsy. He called it a biopsy. I said, you know, honey, you're going to have a biopsy. He told me what the biopsy included, you know, cracking open his skull, taking a piece of his brain out. Rory was pretty up for it. You know, he was pretty up for it. So that Tuesday, my entire family's there in the waiting room. I remember thinking, this cannot be happening. I am handing my 13-and-a-half-year-old son over to this man I've spent 30 minutes with, and he is going to cut open his skull. this is so bizarre. This cannot be happening. My family is waiting in the waiting room. Like I said, I couldn't be with them. I mean, I was so agitated and so anxious. I found different spots, and it was 2 hours, and it was 3 hours, and it was 4 hours. You know, and we were like, what is happening? What is happening? What is happening? My sister and two of my sister-in-laws are nurses. They were there. Finally, it's over, and Tamita comes out. And I could just tell by the look on his face. And he said, Mr. Zuba, I got as much as I could. It was not what I thought it was. It's a very invasive, very fast-growing cancer. It's like a wildfire. I got as much as I could, but it's still there. If I would have got more out of it, he wouldn't be able to speak. He wouldn't be able to walk. I did the best that I could. And he said, you have to know that the next 24 to 48 hours are critical, because if his brain swells and swells and swells, he's not going to make it. You know, he's not going to make it. And I said, can I see him? And he said, yeah, you can see him. And I went in and I thought, oh, he looks so much better than I thought. He looked good. I thought, oh, he looks really, really good. They put him into his room and he started to perk up. And my sister-in-law, Janine, was with us. And, you know, of course, we're staring at him thinking, is your brain going to swell or you're going to die right in front of us? And after about 2 hours, he kind of motioned. And Janine, who's a nurse, said, do you want the whiteboard? Do you want the whiteboard? And he said, yeah. And he was able to write, cold in here. And it was freezing in that hospital because of the air conditioning. And Janine she couldn't believe it. And I thought, I think he's going to make it. You know, I think he's going to make it. I think he's going to make it. And he did. He made it. We still didn't really know what it was. So a couple of days later, Tamita said, it's a glioblastoma, which is a terminal brain cancer. He didn't say it was terminal at the time. He said it's a glioblastoma. I didn't know what the glioblastoma was. My mom did. The nurses in my family did. And he also said he had a stroke during surgery. So I got the diagnosis and I got the prognosis within days. I'm wondering, Jessica, for you, it's like, when did you get the prognosis? When did you realize what the journey ahead was going to look like for you?
So for us, it took about 10 days, but the day after we arrived in St. Louis at Children's, they knew it was a tumor and they knew it was cancerous, not just benign, because once we got there and they did additional imaging, they saw that it had already spread to her liver, and she had a few nodules on her liver as well. So that very next day, they told us that they were prepping her for surgery, and I couldn't wrap my mind around it. And the night before, they had given her something for pain because she was in tremendous, tremendous pain. And they gave her a dose of OxyContin, the liquid, the pediatric version of it. And within 30 minutes, she was jumping on the bed. And I remember, and then we were admitted onto the oncology floor. So I'm seeing bald-headed kiddos pushing IV poles and parents with faces that just looked like they had been through hell and back. And I thought, oh my goodness, it was so hard to look at them. I wanted to look away. And I thought, this can't be right. Why? This has all got to be such a mistake. And here my kiddo is bouncing on the bed. And she was hungry and she hadn't really had much of an appetite. but that pain control, she finally had pain control, and she was hungry. So I remember she wanted chicken fingers. We read the little menu to her, and she wanted chicken fingers and fries. And I remember thinking, how can she have a tumor the size of a softball in her stomach if she's bouncing on the bed wanting chicken fingers? But the next day, they took the surgery, and Dr. Warner, this amazing surgeon, sat down with us beforehand and then after. And we've encountered many earthly angels on our journey, and he was one of them. And he told us, he goes, it's cancer. He goes, I don't know what kind it is. He goes, it's cancer. He goes, this is a marathon and not a sprint. So they put her port in, which, because of her age, and different hospitals do it differently, but they did a port which had double lumens. So instead of it just being, it was sewn underneath her skin, but it was also 2 tubes that permanently were sewn in and looped just underneath the skin, in between her breastbone and above her muscle and just below the epidermal layer. So she had 2 tubes permanently attached to her body. And we called those our tubies when she was little. And we had later, as she became older, we advanced to an internal port. But the fear of those things being pulled and tugged, and just seeing that in my child and her baby flesh, just to see that scar was so absolutely surreal. But so from that first day on, when she had surgery, she had the port, so that when we found out what type of cancer it actually was, they could begin the protocol. And I didn't understand that, because I thought, if she's got cancer, let's start doing something about it. Like, not that I wanted my baby to get chemo, but I thought, if she's got this beast inside of her, these rogue cells that shouldn't be there, let's start attacking them with everything that we've got, with all of our modern science. And they said it doesn't work that way. And now I know, because of protocols, they've learned, although they've got a lot to learn still, we have a lot to learn about cancer, and certainly pediatric cancer. But depending on the diagnosis, depending on the tumor, depending on the staging, there's different protocols. So we had to go through this excruciating waiting process. And at one point, it was the breaking point. It was like day 7. We were literally all going crazy. The nurses actually had to move her room away from, because at one point we were right across from the nurses' station. And our family was coming in, and we were just bombarding the staff. Of course, you can imagine we were waiting to find out what they had, what new information that they could give us. So they had moved her down a couple of additional rooms away from the nurses' station, and we had family coming in and out. But at one point, I think, to offer us a glimmer of hope, and I'm still grateful for it, it turned out to be incorrect information. But one of the residents came to us and she said, "Good news. We thought it was neuroblastoma, but it's not." And I'm far from a pathologist or a physician, but there's different staining that they do. They slice the tumor and then they run it through different tests in the lab, and doctors that specialize in just looking at the tumors and the different stains that they do, then they come up with a diagnosis. They can figure out definitively what it is. And they said, "Good news, it's not neuroblastoma," which is what they were thinking. We think it's a Wilms tumor based on how the stain was looking that day. And I immediately called one of my colleagues, and I used to be a pharmaceutical sales representative. So I was working in the medical field, and I feel blessed because I had a lot of physicians that I could call upon, and good friends and close friends and colleagues in the medical community that I could lean upon. And I could say, "Do you know what this is? Or can you call upon your resources and help me?" And they could get me those names. And I had the name of the #1 doctor for Wilms tumors at the time. It was Dr. Perlman, and she was in Chicago. And I had her on the phone. And she said, if your daughter has it, we will send a helicopter for her. The next day, we will have her here. We know what to do. So I had this whole plan. And I remember talking with my dad. We were walking down the hallway, and we were both in tears. So we went from thinking, please let it just be liver enzymes that are out of balance to form some type of mass that shouldn't be there, which will just go away, to then praying for a favorable cancer. And then the stain 24 hours, 36 hours later went in a different direction. And so it was about day 10 that we realized that it wasn't Wilms. It wasn't obviously a blood cancer, but it was Ewing sarcoma. And then they pulled us into a room, and all of the team came to get us, and they came to get my husband and I. My ex-husband, we're no longer married. And he said, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. And I said, and my father was there, he's the patriarch of my family, very, very blessed to have him. And my whole family has been so supportive. But I said, Dad, I'm going to need you in here for this one. But I could tell by the severity of their tone. And then as they took us into this private consult room off of the oncology floor, and they sat us all down, but there wasn't enough chairs, so my father had to stand. And there was Dr. Warner, the surgeon. And then there was the primary oncologist, but it was a teaching hospital, so they rotate. So it was just the oncologist that was on rotation that week. And then it was the resident under her. And then there was a student. And then my husband and I in the room. And then they told us that Olivia had Ewing sarcoma, which I had never heard of Ewing sarcoma before. Never heard of Ewing's. And that it was an aggressive form of cancer, and that hers had already metastasized to the liver, and that it would be in a very, very aggressive, one of the most aggressive treatments that a child could endure, and that it would be months and months and months of very harsh treatment. And then they gave us the long list of side effects that would come along with it, and told us that she probably would never have children. She's 4.5 at the time. And I'm thinking, I want my baby to be here tomorrow. And in my mind, I'm thinking, is she going to lose her hair? That was, you don't know all these, Margo, like you said, you're thinking of, oh, my child's going to have glasses, and then you go to thinking they're going to lose their hair. How am I going to talk to her about this? And I still, all of the buzzing in your head is this is your reality. And the oxygen just completely leaves your lungs. And I remember asking the resident if she could stand up and give my father her seat, because my dad needed to absorb the information. I thought, he needs to have a seat. And the head oncologist that I did not have a great sense of empathy from her. And I understand the world of oncology, especially now, all these years later. They have to have that. They don't have to. Many of them adopt this certain demeanor to be able to handle families and be able to deliver this news. But I looked at Dr. Warner, the surgeon, and I directed all of my questions at him. And I said, what should we do? Should we stay here in St. Louis? And I knew in my heart of hearts that that's not where we needed to be. I thought, okay, first of all, Olivia was unique to our family, unique in the world. And she was really, really unique and rare in the world of Ewing's. So she needed to be with an A team. And I asked how many cases, they treated. And that's when my pharmaceutical training kind of came in. And I'm grateful for my training in that, because I worked with white coats all day long, and it was my job to convince them as the patient advocate to sell them, to convince them to choose my company's products over the competitors, and to tell them why. And I believe that with conviction, not from a different perspective, but I was not intimidated by them. I had respect, but I also could see really, really clearly the individual in front of me. And I knew that that team was not going to be overall Olivia's treating team.
Let me ask,
So
let me
yeah.
ask you this. So when the suggestion was that she wouldn't be able to have children of her own, at that point, did you think, well, she is going to live to be an adult?
I was hoping that that would be the least of our worries. And I had infertility. I had to have infertility treatments to be able to bring both of my daughters into the world. So I thought, okay, this was a potential challenge for her anyway. I always wanted that to be an easy process for my daughters. But I thought, okay, I want her here. I want her here. But then it became... Mm-hmm.
So even though she's diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma, at that point, you did not think, oh, she's been diagnosed with a terminal cancer. You didn't think that.
Well, they told us that her percentage, that she had between a 20 and a 30% chance of making it 5 years.
Okay. Did you allow that to sink in at that point?
I mean, it hit me like a ton of bricks, but I thought, okay, within 10 minutes after that conversation, I told Dr. Warner she's going to be in that 20 to 30% category.
Okay. So
my daughter will survive.
So within the course of 10 days, you have a little 4.5-year-old who's got some issues, and then 10 days later, you're told she's got a 20 to 30% chance of surviving. Yeah, that's what I would call walking through fire.
Absolutely. And I thought, I will move heaven and earth to find the top specialist, the top surgeon, the top radiologist, the top interventional radiologist. I made it my life's mission to research every herb, every alternative treatment.
Yeah, I don't get into treatment quite yet.
Yeah.
So Joe, what can you tell us about, when you and Margo realized, like what the prognosis was for your tiny little boy, that you were so thrilled that you got him home?
So when he went in to have surgery, they do what's called a frozen slice, and they do a quick pathology right there in the operating room. And so when Dr. Tomita came out and took us into the consult room off the OR waiting room there, he said, again, this tumor is very, very large. I only took just a little bit. I took what I could safely get, was the phraseology he used. We did, the frozen section in the operating room. It is malignant. We'll have kind of the final pathology within a couple of days. But he said the where and how Andrew's tumor was located, it was pressing on his optic nerve as well as wrapped around his carotid artery. And so it was a very delicate position. And so they had to be careful anyway. But when, Dr. Tomita said, I took as much as I could safely get, and this is what the pathology shows. At that point, we hadn't really started going down any treatment options, but with that, it was always, if we can get him to 2, and he said, but realistically, if we can get him 6 months, if we can have him survive 6 months. So needless to say, that was devastating, especially after leaving, Christopher and his short time here with us, physically with us. That was obviously very, very, very devastating news.
So you guys are marking the anniversary of Christopher's passing. Your life turns upside down. And in a very short period of time, the news is, can't guarantee that little boy number 2 is going to be here in 6 months.
Right.
Margo, what's your recollection of what that time was like for you?
Well, the story of we're going to just scoop it out and everything's going to be okay, that is gone. Our family does not know I'm pregnant. I mean, how do you say Andrew has a brain tumor and by the way, I'm expecting? The hospital staff knew I was pregnant. Our family did not. We wanted to get through because it was early in my pregnancy, but based on what Dr. Tamita was telling us, I potentially could be bearing Andrew and giving birth to Matt at the same time. You know, Tom, you were describing the surgery, and my thought as you were describing it, Andrew went through that surgery 9 times, 8 of them on one side, and one time Dr. Tamita went in the other side to see if he could get any more going through the other direction. And you know, how, you know, just like, how is that our life?
Well, to tell people that don't know about the staples that they use.
Yeah, they make like a large C. It's like a flap, you know, so it starts in the center and it's a big C. And, you know, they pull the skin down and then they have to remove the bone like a puzzle piece is how I used to describe it, and go in and do their stuff and then put it back. And on the one side that they did 8 times, over time, that bone piece gets impacted. The muscle, the very little bit of muscle you have in your temple, right, is gone. And so in later photographs of Andrew, it is all concave here. It's all bumpy. You can feel the titanium plates holding that piece in place. Andrew also ended up needing shunts throughout his life. Gosh, probably had 90 shunt revisions by the time he passed away. And after surgeries especially, there'd be a lot of debris in the fluid in his brain, and which would clog up the shunts, and the spinal fluid would come leaking out of the staples. You know, there'd be 100 staples, you know, holding the head together. And so, yeah, I just think the reality and then trying to gather information and what we, you know, our journey, you know, started out with no technology as we know it, and it ended with a doctor coming in and telling you something, and you immediately in your hands could look up and start pulling information right away. So
I want to make one thing clear. They are literally metal staples that they staple into our children's head. Metal, big metal staples. I remember.
And then like a staple remover, there's a tool that pinches it in the center and they collapse like a staple remover would at a, you know, in a piece of paper.
I would like to track this nurse down at Children's, because she said to me, we're going to remove Rory's staples. would you like to come with us, Mr. Zuba, so you could do it? I remember thinking, are you fucking kidding me? Remove the metal staples from my son's skull? No, thank you. I'm not interested in doing that. Ah! Let me share this. I've shared it before. It is my therapy, so you may all send me a bill. I knew Rory had something called a glioblastoma. Like you said, I had a flip phone. I didn't have a computer. I didn't really know what it was. It didn't sound great, but he was alive, and he seemed to me to be getting better and better and stronger. I knew that they were going to transfer him to the Rehab Institute of Chicago for his therapy because of the stroke. My wife, Trish, that was the very first place that she worked after college. So I thought, that's cool. We're going to be in the building where Mom was. Once we got to that building, our room looked out at Passavant Hospital, the hospital that I was born in. So again, I'm telling myself a story. We're being held, we're being surrounded. This is good, this is good. So we're at the Rehab Institute. It's a Friday afternoon, and there's the group of kids there. We're going to go in the van, and we're going to go see the Rugrats movie on a Friday afternoon. I was kind of excited. Rory was kind of excited. It was a nice break. We get out of this joint, go see a movie, get some popcorn. But before we saw the movie, they were going to transport us to Northwestern Memorial Hospital to speak with the expert who was going to talk to me about Rory's radiation. Her name is Dr. Marymount, and anyone that has encountered her knows exactly where I'm going with the story. What they said to me is, she's brilliant. She's absolutely brilliant. She's really lacking in bedside manner. She's really lacking in bedside manner, but she's the best. She's the best. So we, Rory's in a wheelchair. We go in this van. This really nice person, drives us, over to Northwestern, which is enormous, a beautiful lobby. We take the elevator up. We're going, this hall, this hall, this hall, this hall. I'm still in the twilight zone thinking, what the hell is happening to my life? And we go in this little office. Hello, Mr. Zuba, I am Dr. Marymount. Oh, Well, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna make a cap for his head. There'll be little holes in the cap. It's literally a cap. They'll put the cap on. We're gonna bombard his brain with radiation. It's called whole brain radiation. I'm literally staring at her. And Rory goes, it's very similar to what you said, Jessica. Rory goes, am I going to lose my hair? She said, yeah. He was like, oh, he loved his hair. I mean, he loved his hair. And she said, you know what, Mr. Zuba, anyone could do this. I mean, we're literally going to bombard his brain with radiation. You could have it in Rockford if you want. We could coordinate it. Anywhere you want to go, we'll coordinate it. It's like, okay. She said, I need you to come out in the hall. I want you to sign some forms. I was like, okay. Rory, you stay here. Your dad and I are going to go out in the hall. There are people coming up and down. She looks at me and she said, Mr. Zuba, how smart is Rory? And I said, well, he's brilliant. Why? She said, well, I mean, we are really going to bombard his brain with radiation. And in a year or so, you're going to notice that the effects of the radiation, his IQ points are going to, oh, wait a second. He's got a glioblastoma. He won't be alive a year from now. I said, what? She said, he has a terminal cancer. He's not going to be alive a year from now. That's the first time. That's the first time anyone ever said to me that my kid was going to die from the glioblastoma. And she is telling me in the hall outside of her office at Northwestern. That is not okay. I had to go back in the office with a big smile because you know what we were getting ready to do? Go see the Rugrats movie. We saw the Rugrats movie and I kept staring at him thinking, you're gonna die. You too are gonna die. You're gonna die, you're gonna die, you're gonna die. And, you know, they brought us back, you know, I got him tucked in his bed. He's as happy as can be because he is literally getting better and better and better. I go into the bathroom on the floor and sob and sob and sob and sob and sob. That's how I found out that my son had a glioblastoma, a terminal brain cancer. And that is not okay. I mean, that is just not okay. What I want to do, if you can, I'm not going to say briefly, but if you can kind of, Jessica, give us an overview of, you get the diagnosis, Ewing sarcoma, not great. What did treatment look like for you? And how long did the treatment last until your beautiful daughter left her physical body?
Yeah. So treatment was really, really harsh, as it is, you know, with most pediatric cancers, and especially with Ewing's, because it is so aggressive and you have to be so aggressive to try to have any type of chance against it. So she was given 30-year-old protocol, and most of these chemotherapies, one was a derivative of Agent Orange, and one they call the Red Devil, doxorubicin, and literally is red, and it causes heart defects. So, but you sign off all of these waivers because the alternative is that your kiddo is going to make it a matter of, weeks or months, and hers was growing so fast. So we knew minimum, and they don't want to talk, initially they didn't want to talk very far, go very far out into the future. So we were just kind of taking it a cycle at a time. But initially I said, well, just take it out, take it. She's got something foreign that shouldn't be in her body, take it out. And they said it's too large to do that. They wanted to do several cycles and then do imaging again, see how it was responded. And luckily hers did respond really well initially. It shrunk down until it was a manageable enough size, and it was still quite large, but it shrunk down. And in the interim, I was researching the very best surgeons and Ewing sarcoma, what I wanted to be our A team. And I talked with MD Anderson, and actually MD Anderson, to their credit, they said, don't come to us in Texas, go to New York City to Dr. Myers and Dr. Wexler. Go out there because currently they are the best Ewing sarcoma team. So that's what we did. We did the initial few rounds of treatment, and Olivia lost her hair, and the hair is such a small thing. We learned that hair comes and it goes, but she lost her hair after the very first cycle of chemotherapy, and they did not prepare us for that. And her chemo was so harsh that every time we would be inpatient for a week, we would be off for 2 weeks, but we would never be at home for 2 weeks because she would spike a fever, she would get neutropenic, and any type of fever can be a risk of infection, and it's an ambulance ride to the hospital and you have to go back in. So that was our life. We transferred to, so we were in a small town in Illinois, Mahomet, Illinois, is where we were living at the time, East Central, and we moved. My mother came with us. So my Olivia, her daughter in treatment, and then Lily, who was 2 at the time, and my mother and I, we lived in a Ronald McDonald House in New York City, the Upper East Side of New York and Manhattan, and we were just a few short blocks away from Memorial Sloan Kettering, which was strictly a hospital for cancer. And we were there. She had a huge surgery with Dr. Quali, who was another one of our angels. And he did the very best that he could to get everything. But he even told us, he goes, I wasn't able to get zero margins, which is when they're able to get all of the tumor as well as the tissue around to make sure that, but hers was so invasive. He did the very best that he could. And then we were there for 11 months and coming from the cornfields of Illinois, living in Manhattan with all of these other families who we grew really close with. And a lot of them didn't make it, and some of them did. And so, then to sum it up a little bit more, she was in remission for a couple of short months, and then she relapsed. And we noticed her eye wasn't tracking, so immediately went down to St. Louis Children's. They did scans right away. And the early reading of the scans were good. The doctor came in, she said, "Good news, everything is good." She goes, "We're just waiting on one more image." She goes, "But we think that everything's fine." So we thought, well, maybe some of the chemos just cause a little bit of neuropathy. Maybe she's just going to need glasses. Well, that last image that they were waiting on, it was the optic nerve image. And she had relapsed in her maxillofacial cavity. And the tumor was large, and it was pressing on the back of her eye. So that final image that we were waiting on was it was the image that we needed to see. And I'll never forget the doctor, she pulled her mask down, and she was pregnant, so she was wearing additional kind of protective, face masks and gowns and everything. And I thought, why is she doing this? She's putting herself at risk. And Olivia was right beside me. And she was 5 then at that time, 5, going on 5.5. And she, tears in her eyes, and she told me in the ER room, it was just Olivia and I learned, and I knew all of the statistics in my head. First of all, she's had Ewing's. Second of all, she's had relapse Ewing's. I know that now her percentage of survival is minuscule. And here's my child who I can hide nothing from. So I'm trying to perfect my mommy face to be able to turn around and appease her fears, why we're back in this hospital all of a sudden at nighttime. They readmit us to the hospital, to the oncology floor, back where it all began. And I called New York, her physicians there, and they closed the door on us. They said, "There's nothing more we can do. You have 6 months. Enjoy your time with her." And I thought, that's not good enough. So we did everything that we could, and we got her stabilized. And then we ended up taking her to Germany because we had exhausted all of our resources in the States. And they didn't have anything else available to her for her type of cancer. And I thought, this isn't good enough. And we did whatever we could. We did a lot of additional research. So we took her to 2 different clinics in Germany, one to detox her, to build her immune system back up, because after, years of being on chemotherapy, at that point, it was a little over a year and a half, I think, her immune system was totally depleted. And then the idea was that we would go to the second clinic to actually be able to target her type of cancer with immunotherapy and antigens. And while we were in Germany, she relapsed. So we were in Germany for her 7th birthday. We celebrated New Year's in Bavaria, Germany, in this beautiful hospital clinic with all of these private pay people from all over the world, these beautiful souls. And I remember looking out and seeing all of the fireworks over Bavaria and looking at Olivia and trying to memorize every little bit of her face. The way that she laughed, the way her voice sounded, the little curve of her nose, the little hair that was starting to come back because she was off of chemotherapy, so her hair was growing back in. And I tried to take pictures and just soak it all up because I knew that our time was really precious. And then during that time, we had found Dr. Anderson, who is a Ewing sarcoma specialist, and he landed in Cleveland at the Cleveland Clinic. We flew, I called him from the steps of Germany, and I called his cell phone. Somehow I got this amazing oncologist, somehow divine intervention. I got his cell phone, and he picked up, and he goes, "I normally don't answer, but I saw this was an international call, so I thought it might be important." And I said, he didn't know me. I said where I was, and he said, come right here. We'll direct admit you right to the floor. And St. Jude's, I had called them before, and they had turned us down twice. They wouldn't take, she was not a candidate. And a lot of people don't understand that it's not a hospital where you can just drive in and ask to be treated. You have to go through a panel, and a committee has to approve your child based on their diagnosis and what they can offer your child. So we were never a candidate for that. So we were always searching for the best. And long story short, the Cleveland Clinic bought her an additional, not bought her, but gifted her and us with an additional year of good quality time. And we were blessed to have them, and to have them keep that door open for us. Think outside of the box, but do whatever they could. And in the interim, we did our best to get into a clinical trial, which at the time was groundbreaking, and in a sense has become more of the standard of care. It's an immunotherapy trial, and we were randomized. Your kiddos were either randomized into the standard of care, which was 30-year-old chemotherapy, which was fourth-line chemo, or this immunotherapy, where they would take a sample of the tumor and then create a vaccine against the tumor. So that the idea is that the body recognizes that there is a foreign invader and the body will attack it. And we did whatever we could.
Let me stop you for a
Yeah.
second. So what you are saying is the very first treatment that they offered you is a treatment that they have been using for 30 years.
30 years.
A
Yeah.
30-year-old treatment.
And you see that when you sign the forms, you see the date of the chemotherapy. You see at the date that the patent was approved, how long it's been used. And it's unbelievable because you don't know that unless you're in that world.
And they know they have 30 years of data. They know how ineffective that treatment is. And that is the first thing they offer you. And for folks that get admitted to the trial, half of them get the 30-year-old treatment.
Yes.
There is something wrong with this picture.
So incredibly wrong. I said, why do you need a trial? 30 years, that's your trial. That's your arm. That's your study arm.
Yeah.
Let's look at the new numbers. Yeah.
I want to piggyback on something you said. And I mean, if you're new, then you're going to get to know a little bit about me. There are some people out there that believe that I shouldn't be able to express anger. I'm not exactly sure why they feel that, but for years and years and years, around the holidays, I have sat in a movie theater and I have seen Marlo Thomas. And what she has said is, we need your money. We need your money. Our doors are open to people with cancer. We will treat you. You have enough on your minds. You don't have to pay for treatment. You don't have to pay for transportation. You don't have to pay for housing. We got you, America. We got you. You have cancer. We got you. I worked for St. Jude's. I'm going to share with you my experience. My kid has a glioblastoma. That's a terminal brain cancer. My immediate response, send it to St. Jude's. Let's see what they have to offer. Send it to St. Jude's. They're groundbreaking, record-breaking treatments. Marlo tells us this over and over and over again. No charge for treatment, no charge for transportation, no charge for housing. A family's dream. Marlo loves us. This was the response. Mr. Zuba, do not even send us your files. For God's sakes, don't drive here. We have nothing for you. We have nothing innovative, nothing groundbreaking. There's no trials. Whatever we would do for you here, you could get at any major medical center around the country. Don't waste your time. When I see Marlo asking for money, I'm like, no way, lady, no way, lady, no way, lady. That's me. That's me. That's my little commercial. So Margo, let me back up. So Jessica, from 4.5-year-old diagnosis to the time Olivia left her physical body, how long was that?
It was just a little under 4 years, so 3 years and 8 months.
So you walked
of
through
constant fighting death every day. Yeah.
Yeah, you walked through fire for, I mean, the beginning of you thought it was the fire. The actual fire burned brightly once she actually did leave her physical body.
Right. But it was one surgery after another, complication. It was, they would say, the radiologist, and again, like world-renowned radiologist, and these are just the side effects, but she's not going to get VOD. It's like a 3% chance that she's going to get VOD. Guess what? She got VOD, which is venous occlusive disease. Her liver started to shut down. You name it, it happened to this kiddo. She had to have this massive reconstructive surgery. They took a bone out of her leg to rebuild her face because the tumor, when she relapsed, it was in her face.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just interrupt you. This is childhood cancer. This is childhood cancer. Let me start, Margo, to put things in perspective. So Joe shared with us that the initial thought was you have about 6 months with your second baby boy. What I'd like you to do is share with folks how long the 6 months stretched out to. And then you already said he had nine of those. And I know he had a ton of other stuff, but first, how long past the 6 months did he live?
He lived an additional 24 years and 5 months from diagnosis.
Say that again.
24 years and 5 months beyond his diagnosis.
And I know you remember all the treatments. Give us an idea of what you guys went through.
So there was the initial surgery, and I believe, Joe, it was in the 16 to 18 hour, the first one. It was incredibly long. And then he did chemotherapy, and we were in a study. And we have an interesting story about that study. And it was a protocol that was called the 9-in-1 protocol. And so you were inpatient and you got 9 drugs over 48 hours, 36 hours.
I think it was 48 hours, yeah.
Yeah, so a pretty big cocktail. And Joe had mentioned the get him to 2. And so the feelings about, you've shared how horrific the radiation was going to be for your 13-year-old son. The earliest that they even would consider doing radiation is age 2. And it's all because their brain is still developing. And so the mindset was, if you could get him to age 2, we could consider doing radiation. So that became our benchmark. And so we did chemotherapy from December of 88 until December of 89, till about February of 90. And he had an anaphylactic reaction to it. He had an allergic reaction to the chemotherapy. And I looked over, we were inpatient, I looked over and he was blue. We had a code, and that was his body had said, tap, tap, I'm done. He reoccurred shortly after that. He reoccurred. He had 9 craniotomies. We did chemotherapy again going into kindergarten. He didn't tolerate it very well. He would go to school. He started kindergarten on chemotherapy and would go to school for 3 weeks. And then we would do the chemotherapy. And then he would be homesick for a week on IV Zofran because the oral Zofran wouldn't control it. He reoccurred and then, had surgery after the chemo because the chemo wasn't working, and then it grew back again. So by spring of 1st grade, we did radiate him. He reoccurred again in 3rd grade and had a stroke. He had his first stroke, and we too spent several months at the Rehab Institute in Chicago. He had a right hemiparesis, and so the whole right side went out. We then moved to California, and so about 12 years of this journey was in Chicago, and the other 12 years of the journey was at Children's LA. He reoccurred on September 10th of 2001. And he ended up getting an infection in his brain from the surgery, which caused months of complications. He ended up with a total of 4 strokes in there, all different. One that took everything out. He had no communication with his frontal lobe. He had a brainstem stroke. He got a secondary cancer in his bone marrow, and from the radiation damage from when he was so young, just his brain stem started to kind of disintegrate, and he was having little bleeds in that. So we never went more than 3 months without a scan. It never went away. It was a lifelong journey, and we knew the only way it would be over would be him not being here anymore. And so it was always living on borrowed time and being aware every birthday, will you be here next year? Every Christmas, will this be our last holiday together? You definitely live in the present moment when you're living alongside of this. And it was interesting, you all were sharing about being delivered this news with your children, and how do you, and for Andrew, the remarkable thing is he knew nothing different than having brain cancer. So to him, this was just normal for him. And so conversations could be had in a way, I don't know, it just felt really like matter of fact and age appropriate, accepting, go with the flow. It's almost heartbreaking to think that is someone's normal life. We didn't have a life before this, and my other 2 kids were born into this. So my other 2 kids didn't know a life without hospitals, crisis, change of plans, mom being gone for long periods of time. This was just what our normal looked like.
Joe, how were you and Margo able to keep little baby boy, who you were so grateful that you got to bring home, because you didn't get to bring Christopher home, and you were worried that he might have to have glasses? How were you able to keep him alive for 24 years and 5 months after diagnosis?
Boy. We never settled. We never took things that this was all there was. We always felt that there was something else could be done. Margo spent so much time researching, questioning, talking to. She became an expert in all these things, that whether it was neurology, hematology, oncology, endocrinology, all the ologies, Margo was the queen of ology. And she took this child and took this illness on her back. And she carried him. She carried him on her back throughout this whole journey. And it was interesting because it's interesting how the backgrounds that we come from. I mean, when Andrew was diagnosed, Margo was 22 and I was 26. And so here are these med students who are older than Margo and closer to my age, residents closer to my age, and yet we never let them talk at us. We always had them talk with us. We never took what they said as being the be all end all. We questioned them. We asked for more detail. We said, you know what? Put everything on the table. We've already buried one child, and we were basically told what we were going to do with that child. We have geared ourselves up for this. We want to know everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, because we want to make informed decisions, informed choices. We can handle this. And we saw some very nasty things, to be powerless, to have to sit and watch your child go through this. Tommy had said, I watched Andrew have a seizure. I'm sitting in our family room on a Sunday afternoon, and all of a sudden I hear this pounding on a wall. And I go in his room because he had laid down to take a nap, and he's on the bed. It's the headboard hitting the wall. But you know what? You see it. Margo, call 911. Andrew's having a seizure. Matt was, okay, I'll move the car out of the driveway so the ambulance can pull in. And Allie's like, okay, I'll get a backpack together. And it all converged. It was just, a well-oiled machine, and led by my beautiful wife.
So Margo, and Jessica, you know her too. We know an incredible woman. Her name is Jessica Lindberg, and she's Ethan's mom. And she has a phrase that she's held on to, and it's made for this, made for this, made for this. In retrospect, would you say that you were made for this, that you were made to be Andrew's mother? And I know you really, really well. What is remarkable is you loved your life. You loved, while he was in his physical body, you loved it. You loved having these 3 living, breathing human children. You loved it. It's not like it's like, oh, I'm suffering. Wouldn't you say, isn't that true, Joe?
Oh, for sure. And I think what's interesting, like Margo said, that's all we knew. That's all Andrew knew, because he was diagnosed so young, and Matt and Allie were born into it. The life we're living now is kind of foreign to us. And kind of what people see their life is early in their marriage, that being just the 2 of you, and where ours was thrust into this fire immediately, with Christopher, and then with Andrew, and now that fire has subsided. But I would say, true, I love what you said. Margo was made for this, and it was exemplified in Christopher's life, in Andrew's life, in her taking care of her father at the end of his time here. Truly, truly, truly a gift.
And what's beautiful is, yes, the fire has subsided, and it has literally burned both of you to the ground. And the phoenix is rising. I mean, the phoenix by the name of Joe and the phoenix by the name of Margo is rising at a really, really rapid rate. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, definitely, definitely.
It would.
And I think that in taking what has happened in the past and viewing that as the past and taking that and but now living going forward is key.
And for folks that don't know, I had a 90-minute plus conversation with Margo. I had a 2-hour conversation with Jessica where we got into life, where we got into death, when we got into the road to healing. So what we're talking about now, it's a like a laser focus on, you know, the childhood cancer and how that affected their families. But the rest of the story is told as well. And if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll find both Jessica's story and both Margo and Joe's story. Margo, is there something that you want to add to this notion that yes, indeed, you were made for this?
I have said this to you, Tom. The hardest day while Andrew was with us is easier than learning to walk a life without him here in his physical body.
Say that again. It's really important because you just listed 9 craniotomies. Say that again. The hardest day.
The hardest day during Andrew's life was easier than what the journey has been after he left his physical body.
And
I think that's important, yeah, because what Margo said earlier, the alternative was him not being here, and that wasn't. We were going to do.
So it's September 29th. Is the intensity of the hardness, has it changed, or is it as hard today as it was 5 years ago?
Oh, no. It is better now. It is better, but it is daily, and it doesn't come naturally to me. I have to be very intentional every single day to continue healing. It's not a destination.
And you are. I mean, you work the program.
Yeah, I really do. I asked you before we got on here, like, well, what about childhood cancer do you want to talk about? And I was making some notes, and, I even wrote, do I identify as a cancer parent still? Because I've been so the first 5 years, I just sat in the story, right? Like I was never going to be okay.
After Andrew died.
After Andrew died, I'm never going to be okay. My life is over. It's my fault he died. I missed something, on and on and on. And so in the last 2 years, I have addressed every belief I was carrying with me that was so painful. And I have landed in a place where I believe truths that are more peaceful for me. So my focus now is what's next, and you have given me opportunities to share Andrew's story, and I'm taking steps forward, and, it's unlimited possibilities. And Joe and I are now able to look at our life together and what do we want this to look like? And it's definitely forward focused. And, you know, Andrew comes right along with us, as does Matt and Allie, and what our family looks like now and how we operate, in a manner that there's not crisis every minute, you know?
Yeah.
So
I think that there are people that are watching this live and people that will watch the recording and say, well, I've experienced Margo and Anna. I've experienced the energy of those two together. I had no idea Margo's been through this. And I think that the gift of this conversation tonight is now we have a better understanding of what Margo and Joe lived through with their first two little boys. And to be able to see you interacting with Anna, talking about gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. For most parents whose children have died, one and the other, they do not exist in the same universe. Most parents whose children have died, who have gone through what you have gone through, do not believe they can be grateful again, do not believe they can be excited, do not believe that they can create their future with their husband, and they certainly do not believe any way in hell can they step into something called radiance.
mm-hmm. Well, and I feel like, you know, you talk about waging war with what is, and what a futile exercise that is, and how painful it is. And when I could finally put down my weapons, thinking, you know, the doorbell was going to ring and I was going to have my Lazarus moment, you know, it's like, okay, well then what? And so, the work you have allowed me to do with Anna, you know, sure, we have some fun, but it is the most consciously intentional choice I can make every day to heal. On the worst day, I have yet to find a day I can't find one thing to be grateful for. And I try, right? I try. There are days, right? And I still find something.
Right. And I would contend if that's true for you, it's true for the next person.
Yes.
So I'm going to briefly give an overview. I loved, Jessica, that you brought up, this is what we have to offer you and your 4.5-year-old daughter. It's a 30-year-old treatment. What I was offered is chemo and radiation. And I looked them directly in the eye. Keep in mind, I already had a dead daughter and I already had a dead wife. So I wasn't afraid of any medical person. And my number one objective was to move heaven and earth to keep my kid alive. I said, why exactly would we go in the direction of chemo and radiation? To buy him more time. I said, how much more time? A couple weeks, a couple months? I said, no, thank you. Huh? I said, no, thank you. I'm not going to do chemo. I'm not going to do radiation because I believe what you believe will actually happen. And I'm going to go look for someone that's offering me hope. And the doctors at Children's Memorial Hospital in Chicago said, well, whatever you do, don't go to the Brzezinski Clinic in Houston. Let me start exploring the Brzezinski Clinic in Houston if you guys don't want me to go there. So I had been living in Northern California, and back in the day, we used the term New Age. I had thrown myself into Gary Zukav, into the Seat of the Soul, into everything that Oprah did with her Remembering Spirit. I wanted to push the envelope. And I thought, you know, I wonder if we set the intention to create a happy, healthy, cancer-free Rory, Brennan, Zuba, if we hold that vision, set the intention, can I build a big enough circle around this kid to do that? Can we cure him? And I shared earlier that, you know, along the way, I told myself stories. I told myself stories in order to survive. And the story that I really, really liked is that the single dad with the dead daughter and the dead wife, he has a kid with a glioblastoma, and surprise, surprise, the kid is cured. You know, he's the 0.2%. Miracle, miracle, miracle. That's what I held on to for a while. So back in the day, we had Caring Bridge, and my objective was to get as many people following me on Caring Bridge from all over the world, because I wanted Christians and Jews and Buddhists and Hindus and atheists and witches and warlocks, everyone and anyone. I wanted them to be part of the circle. I wanted them to dance and sing and, you know, burn rabbits, whatever they did. I wanted them to do that, holding the vision of a healthy, happy, cancer-free Rory, Brennan, Zuba. That was very intentional. I had some pretty new agey friends. This name, Dietrich Klinghardt, kept coming up and coming up and kept coming up. And I was like, okay, well, we're going to go to Bellingham, Washington, and we're going to see Dietrich Klinghardt. We contacted the Brzezinski Clinic. Sure, come on down. When we were there, you know, we thought we'll be traditional and we'll go to MD Anderson, you know, so we'll have the yin and the yang. We went to see this Dietrich Klinghardt. It reminded me of being in the presence of Albert Einstein. I thought, this is right up your alley, Rory. You know, and he's doing hoochie and makuchi and laluchi, and I'm like, okay, you know, we'll try it. If you think it'll help, I think it'll help. You know, he put some things in the scar. He did say, I wish you had seen me before you had the craniotomy. I would have had much better success, but, you know, I do think I can help. We go to the Brzezinski Clinic, you know, and I'm like, oh, Lord, have mercy. Because I had read all the research, and Brzezinski had been thrown in jail and this, that, and the other thing. We walk in right behind the registration table or the registration desk is a huge photograph of the Pope. You know, so I could just hear my mom and my grandma and my dad, the Pope? Well, it's got to be good. Rory could have cared less about the Pope, but right over here to the right was a picture of Albert Einstein. You know, so I'm like, the Pope for the Catholic guilt that's still in me, Albert Einstein for him. They come and talk to us. I knew they were lying. I knew they were lying because the doctor said, you know, we'll have him back to school in no time. You know, we'll do this and we'll do this. And, you know, we got this. Rory turns to me and he said, Daddy, I want to try this. I want to try this. This is my 13-and-a-half-year-old son. I was like, okay, you know, we'll try it. It cost tens and tens of thousands of dollars. I did not have tens and tens and thousands of dollars. The community that I live in, Rockford, Illinois, they rose up. They financially made it possible. People gave me their airline points. An anonymous person literally gave me a check for $10,000. We're in Houston. We're trying this very controversial treatment. We go in for some preliminary tests. There are these huge crystals, gorgeous amethyst. You know, I'm like, well, this is really spiritual. You know, I think we're at the right place. No need to go to MD Anderson. We didn't go there. We gave it a try. I mean, we gave it a try. When we got home, my door was open to absolutely everyone and anyone. I had ashes from India. I had water from Lourdes, holy water from Medjugorje. We had chanting bowls. I did acupuncture, Reiki, massage, a no-salt diet. I let the Catholic priest into my house and anoint my son with the holy oils. My joke was, if someone said, paint his fingernails green and jump up and down 7 times and throw salt over your shoulder, I think that'll heal him, I would have done it. I would have done it. There's one thing I said no to. It's really important that I say this. There was a assistant principal at Rory's school who was very interested in what was going on. And he pulled me aside and he said, Mr. Zuba, I've talked with the elders of my church. And you know that Rory is possessed by demons. And that is the cause of the glioblastoma. And we would be willing to come to your house and do an exorcism and cast those demons out. This is the assistant principal of the public school that my son is attending. And I said, thank you, but no thank you. Because I had this image. This is a little wooden hand carved sculpture that had been on my dad's home office desk for as long as I could remember. And this image sustained me. I mean, it's a choice that I made, like every belief, but I firmly believed that my version of God was holding my son. I don't believe in demons. And I chose to believe that my version of God was holding me. So throughout this entire unimaginable, chaotic, painful odyssey, I knew I was being held and I knew Rory was being held. I was never, ever, ever worried about him. Never. I was envious of him. I knew he believed in black holes. He believed in parallel universes. He believed in time travel. I knew when he left his body, the next adventure began. I tried to keep him here as long as I could for me, because I did not want to have to do the grief thing a third time, because it's so indescribably, incomprehensibly horrible. I remember the night that he was in the hospital bed. He was hooked up to a ventilator. And I remember screaming at God, get away from my son. Get out of this room. You cannot have him. You cannot have him. He's mine. He's mine. He's mine. I remember screaming at Trish, get the hell out of here. He's mine. He's mine. I'm keeping him. I have this. I don't know if you guys have something similar. It's Dr. Alexander, who was the neurosurgeon that admitted Rory. It's dated 2/2/2005. It's his hair. I mean, it's the hair that they cut from my son's head the day that he died. I was never worried about him. Never, never, never. I was worried about me. One of the gifts of his death is I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I did everything I possibly could to keep him alive. I couldn't do it. I mean, the kid died anyway. And the gift of that was that I knew without a shadow of a doubt, I was not powerful to keep that kid here. I was not that powerful. And I know that Jessica, you have come to that place, and Margo, you have come to that place, and Joe, you have come to that place. And that knowing, for me, has made all the difference in the world.
I didn't know it at first. I thought I had failed. I had one job left to do, and that was to get him home peacefully, and it wasn't that. And that kept me in a lot of pain for 5 years.
And on September 29th, would you say your definition of home connected to your son has expanded and broadened?
It has. It has.
Joe, what are your thoughts about that?
Being a dad, I think we come from we have the perspective that we're supposed to save. We're supposed to save our kid. Our kid isn't supposed to go through this because we're the dad. We're supposed to protect them. So there was a huge sense of failure that I didn't protect him, that for whatever reason, I was at fault. Something I had done, didn't do, reprimanded him for something, got frustrated at him for something, that this was the punishment for that. But through working and talking and through obviously with you, I know I don't have that power. I didn't have that power with Christopher. I didn't have that power with Andrew. Because if I did, they would still be here.
And what I try to point out is not one parent, not one spouse, not one sibling, not one grandparent. None of us were powerful enough to keep our dead people here. We just weren't.
Right. And I think knowing that, knowing that in your heart, and you know, like Margo said, the gratitude and having the eyes to see things and hear things and the beauty of things, it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, but when you get to that, it is so incredibly freeing. Just, you know, that sack of crap you lug around with you is gone or greatly diminished.
It's freedom. I mean, it is freedom.
Yeah.
Jessica, what are your thoughts about that? This notion that we are not strong enough, we are not powerful enough to keep our beloveds here.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I remember when I was sitting in my car reading your book and I came across those words and I thought, boy, that rings so true. We're just not that powerful. I'm grateful that I feel like I did everything in my power to keep her here. I exhausted all resources that I knew of. We did everything. I did everything, but again, I'm just not that powerful. I initially was hung up in the beginning of my story that I should have saw this coming. I should have saw the early warning signs. We were so connected. How could I have missed this large tumor? I'm grateful that most days I have put that to bed and I don't carry that around like I do, or like I used to. And I'm grateful that I've been able to let that one go on most days. I'm not God. It's freeing. I'm just not that powerful. I'm not called to be him. I get just to be me and do the best that I can in my earthly body here.
So this is how I want to close this conversation about cancer awareness, pediatric cancer awareness. For me personally, I honestly thought that when Ted Kennedy died from a glioblastoma after Rory did, when John McCain died from a glioblastoma, when Joe Biden's son died from a glioblastoma, I thought that there would be this national coalition to finally address the completely barbaric way Western medicine treats glioblastoma. There have been no changes in outcomes for decades. I find it impossible to believe that if people cared and devoted the money, let's say a fraction of the money that we spend on updating this every minute or two, if anybody really cared about glioblastoma, it would be curable in 12 months. So as far as pediatric cancer awareness goes, the treatment of children who have glioblastomas is barbaric, and it has to stop. That's number one. Number two, I think I'm different in that it was my third go round. And it was very easy for me to say, no way am I doing the chemo, no way am I doing the radiation. What I wish someone would have said is, we're removing as much of the cancer as we can, so it's going to seem like your kid doesn't even have cancer. I mean, he's going to be able to go to White Pine State Park the day after Thanksgiving. He's going to go up and down 50 steps. He's going to go hiking across the bridge. You're going to think your kid does not have cancer. There's a very short window, and then it will grow back really, really quickly. So take advantage of the window. Make-A-Wish literally came to see Rory when he was at the Rehab Institute and, wanted to make a wish. And he said, I'd like a laptop. The woman was like, a laptop? Well, of course we'll give you a laptop, but we're talking about a trip. How about some trip? Where would you like to go? I like Japan. All right, then we're going to go to Japan. We never heard from them again, which is fine. But in retrospect, if I had to do it differently, I wish I would have known that there's this short period of time where you're going to have your kid, and then there's going to be a very, very steep decline. So go to Disney, go to Japan, go to the ocean, do absolutely everything, take as many photographs as you possibly can, video. It's not unlike, Margo, you intuitively knowing we got to go to Penny's or we got to go to Sears to get that photo. So I'm wondering from, the three of you, the experiences that you had, in retrospect, are there things that you would have done differently? Not to change the outcome, because we've already established the fact that none of us are that powerful. But there might be someone listening here that would go, oh, Zuba said, he wishes they would have gone on the trip. Maybe we should go on the trip. Maybe we should go to the beach. Maybe I should take a leave of absence from work. From your experiences, in retrospect, are there things that you wish you would have done differently? Jessica, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll go. I wish that I would have taken more photos. In the back of my mind, this was going to be a short blip on our screen of our lives, and we were going to get past the ugly. And I always pictured Olivia on a stage somewhere, telling her story, being an inspiration for others. And I knew that we were going to have a few photographs and a little bit of video, but I didn't want to chronicle all of that because it was going to be something that we were going to get over. And I just so wish that I would have taken more photos and more video of just her sweet little voice, because from the time that she was diagnosed on, I have very few photos. I mean, I have some, but I wish that I would have more. So not so much all of the ugly, although even in the ugly, there's beauty. Looking back, I see pictures of her after surgery and I think, isn't she magnificent? Look what she just came through. She's beautiful. She's magnificent. I see her soul so on fire. Photograph it anyway, take video of it anyway, put it away. You don't have to look at it, but that's what I wish that I would have done.
Yeah, it's beautiful advice. How about you, Margo?
So how we lived, I have no regrets. We gave him a beautiful life, and I wouldn't trade a second of it. My regret is at the end, where my trauma has never been, why did he have to die? It was, why did it have to look the way it was? And I wish he could have been at the hospital and we could have had some more resources and support. So what we visually saw and heard, what we physically saw his body having to go through, we would have had some help with that. And for myself personally, I spent my entire adulthood from 22 to 46 carrying him on my back. And I had a lot of roles. And the one area that I never allowed myself at the end was to just be his mom, to just be able to be with him. Up until his last hours, I was still trying to figure out what was wrong and what we were missing and try to stop what was happening. And to just be still and be his mom, you don't get that time back. And I was figuring out how we were going to fly him to Illinois for a funeral, and how much this was all going to cost. And so but I think, it unfolded exactly how it was supposed to unfold. And so
You can say that on September 29th. Because
I have to keep reminding myself of that, because it does no good. And I was a mom, and I was the best mom, and I was made for being Andrew's mom.
Are you still Andrew's mom?
I will always be Andrew's mom. And yeah.
Joe, as you kind of reflect back, are there any things that you wish you would have done differently?
It's interesting because given we were given that initial 6-month prognosis and the fact that we had MRIs every 3 months forever, we lived in short bursts. And so it was always kind of preparing for that next scan, what's going to happen. And so, like Margo said, we formed a beautiful life for not only for Andrew, but for Matt and Allie, the kids that we brought into this family throughout this journey as well. And the lessons that they took with them and are living out as adults in their lives is extremely beautiful. It's just beautiful. Their compassion, sensitivity, understanding, empathy, is just off the charts. Regret is just like Margo said, the end was not pretty. And
to me,
but
it doesn't have to be a regret. I mean, I'm just wondering, in retrospect, would you have done, like I said, I wish I would have gone to whatever. It's not necessarily a regret.
Honestly, no, I don't think so, because we got to share so many beautiful things and experience and be introduced to beautiful things that probably we would have never seen otherwise.
Yeah.
Whether it's, and still do. It's amazing how you can pick out a kid with special needs out of a crowd. You're drawn to that. And so
you're drawn to that. I think most people look away. You're
totally
drawn to that.
Yes, yeah. And so, I mean, those are the gifts. Those are the gifts that will live as long as I'm in my physical body.
I want to share something with you guys. So Rory was 13 and a half when he died. He was in 7th grade. And his friends, I believe that, his friends weren't domesticated enough so that they immediately moved into mourning. They had experienced grief, for the 5-6 months that they knew their buddy had cancer. So when he died, they figured out a way very quickly to get that grief up and out. And they had these T-shirts made. And it's interesting, Jessica, because this is Rory with brain cancer. And when I would first look at this picture, it made me sick, because his face is puffy because of the steroids. If you look at his arm, Margo, I mean, Rory had a stroke on the right side, so you had the medical name for that, whatever it is. But, I can see it's like, his hand is kind of, it took me a long time. And he's got the pick in his left arm. Now when I look at this, and one of his eyes is smaller. Yeah, it's like, ugh. But I can look at it. I mean, I'm not jumping up and down, but at least I can look at it. I can look at this. It says, "In loving memory, Rory Brennan Zuba." It's a moment. I mean, it's a moment in my life. But what I love, and the kids picked right up on this, Rory, like most 13 and a half year olds, he had his tagline that he would sign everywhere. He would sign his tagline. And he wore those black, are they Doc Martens, I think? And remember the whiteout that you used to use when you typed so with whiteout, he would write his tagline on his black Doc Martens. And this is what his tagline was.
Perfect.
I love that.
Perfect.
Wow.
It was like Zorro. He put his Zuba was here, Zuba was here, Zuba was here, Zuba was here.
Damn.
And I know people will be appalled when I say this. I don't really care. Rory died in 2005, and I have yet to get a marker for where he's buried. Why? I've already bought 2. The idea of going in and buying the 3rd marker, I'm not quite there yet. If I ever do it, though, that's what I'm going to put on, that Zuba was here. Yeah. And I want to make it clear that Zuba.
I think that's your tattoo.
What?
That's your tattoo. Do you have anything with his handwriting?
Maybe, probably. I want to make it clear that Zuba is here. I mean, he absolutely is here. So the Zuba was here. That was him. That was absolutely him. I also wanted to say this, Jessica. You said that you dreamed of Olivia being on a stage telling her story. You do a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful job of telling her story. And we get to know her through you. And you do such a beautiful job that I asked you if you would co-host our new 1-hour program that's going to debut on my YouTube channel this Thursday at 11 a.m. Central. So you will continue to get to tell your story and both of your daughters' stories through that platform, my YouTube channel, this Thursday, 11 a.m. Central.
So excited.
I am humbly honored that the three of you trust me and that I know a lot about the three of you. I know where you've been. I know where you are. And I have a really, really clear picture about what is possible and probable as you step into and continue to co-create your radiant, optimal lives. This is what I know is true. The three of you are walking miracles. You are walking miracles. And I'm so grateful that we took the perfect amount of time to share what we shared tonight, because we're ordinary people. You know, we're ordinary people. And through intention and through creating a vision and feeling the vision and taking the action steps, if the four of us can become walking miracles, anyone listening, the reason that they're drawn to listen to us is because they can become a walking miracle as well. So I thank Christopher, I thank Andrew, I thank Olivia for coming and for leaving when they left their physical bodies, never really leaving us at all, so that we can let people know that there's a new way. There's a new way to do this, which creates a new life, a new way to do life, which is the path to creating beautiful, joy-filled, radiant lives. Do you guys have any final message that you want to share with whoever is listening live or via the recording?
I just feel the hold on, Tom. The hold on. One day at a time. One breath at a time.
Be easy on yourself. Be easy on yourself.
And that the love is all around us, and our loved ones really never go away. They're still here. We can stay connected to them.
Thank you, everybody, for being with us. Check out my YouTube channel. You'll find Jessica's extended conversation with me, Margo's extended conversation with me, and the new 1-hour program called A New Way to Do Grief. Every Thursday, 11 a.m. Central. Take really good care of yourselves. Next time I'll see you is Thursday morning. Okay, take good care, everyone. We are saying good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Let me stop.